Hey everybody, welcome back to the read-along book club of Jeff Vandermeer's The Southern Reach Trilogy. We are pushing forward with acceptance. This is episode 14, and I'm recording this video a little bit differently, so I may change shirts, the lighting may change, because I find that when I record these videos, or when I have recorded them in the past, I'm sitting here for at least an hour, stumbling through the text. It takes far too long to edit as well, so I'm doing these in chunks now, so maybe I might say some things that will be revealed later, meaning I might have some questions that are answered in the later chapters. But anyway, at the time of this recording, I've only read chapter 9 and 10, so I've completed this part. So if I get some things wrong, don't hold me to it. Hopefully future me discovers it down the road. So this section, the director, we finally get to meet Lowry. He's like a Bond villain or something. It's crazy. He's wearing this fancy blue suit. He's got like silvery long hair. He's got like gold-tipped boots or something like that. But he has such a great entrance. It was kind of comical in a way, but I felt like it worked, at least when the scene turned, let's say. But let us get into it. I will shut up. Chapter 009, the director. Lowry's secret facility, right? Secret base on a dreary part of the East Coast with gravel beaches and stark yellowing grass has been set up on the bones of an old military base. Sounds insane, which is appropriate. Here, Lowry has been perfecting his neurology and conditioning techniques, the hypnosis stuff. So this is kind of bringing us back full circle to how everybody was conditioned, including Control, the biologist, everybody. Lowry has had a replica of Area X's lighthouse built and a replica of the expedition base camp. So not only is he in some weird secret hideout, he has a replica, right? I mean, that is so Bond villain. But anyway, let's move on. Sit down and I'll give you a drink, Lowry says. No? Well, I'll make you one anyway. Also very Lowry. But what does Lowry do? Well, before we get there, we need to note that the mane of golden hair, now silver, grown long. So yeah, he's got long silver hair, fancy blue suit, but what happens? Even with a left eye prone to wandering, creepy, as if a tiny planet is straining out of alignment. I love that description. The glass that was in his left hand smashes against the window near your head, shatters. So yeah, he's walking up with these two glasses of alcohol, presumably, and rather than handing her the drink, being the psychologist, of course, whew, he throws it. He throws it and it shatters. What a hell of an entrance. He says, now that you've had your drink, maybe we can get the fuck down to it. Lowry's not messing around. You recline uncomfortable against the pillows, looking out at the sea, the lighthouse, the remains of the glass of scotch. There it is, scotch on the floor. So you thought you'd take a closer look, huh, Cynthia? Thought you'd use my own security codes and bypass your superiors and take a quick peek. Couldn't resist seeing what's beyond the curtain. So you saunter across and you have yourselves a great little holiday. Relax on the beach, right? Once you were across, you got a little kinky thinking about being in that place with your boy toy Whitby? Wanted a bit of a lighthouse on the lighthouse steps? I don't know what to say. This character, this chapter just hit me, completely caught me off guard. I'm trying to understand how we got here. Trying to see if there's a good fucking reason I shouldn't just let Central fire you. I couldn't keep sending in expeditions under my orders without going myself. Your orders, my orders, not your orders. You get that straight. You were in there almost 3 weeks and your report is 4 pages long. Do you understand what you could have stirred up? So yeah, he's just drilling into the director. But your father had been paranoid about the government. So this is when we get to learn about her past a little bit and her journey into the Southern Reach, how she got there, her relationship with, or her history with Lowry and everybody else. But politicians run all the big scams. Interesting word there, right? Because we all know what Central and Southern Reach is like. Government's the thief of all time, of course. You don't want that on your back your whole life just because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. You would stare at pictures of your mother, but you'd feel ashamed when it was the lighthouse keeper's face that kept coming back to you. So we know by now, hopefully you know by now, that her only, and it's reinforced in the next chapter as well with Controls, but there's no plan. The only plan, I guess, that Gloria or the director or Cynthia, whatever you want to call her, had was to get answers, find closure, go try to find out what happened to her mother and the people she knew and loved, especially the lighthouse keeper, because for whatever reason, she had a very close connection to the lighthouse keeper. Now, we've seen a bit of that already, but I'm curious where it's going to lead, how pivotal it's going to be in her life. Well, where the origin of that is anyway. You learn there was something called the Southern Reach, devoted to cleaning up the quote-unquote environmental devastation in what had been the Forgotten Coast and was now Area X. So you changed your name, hired a private investigator to help you hide the rest. You married a man you never really loved. But old Lowry, he finds out, doesn't he? I had my own people check you out. It was a good effort there. All that work to disguise yourself. Turn you in, Cynthia. The unspoken thought. I'm going to keep you all for myself. So because they have this intimate knowledge, this secret knowledge, that Lowry is going to use her as he sees fit, which is kind of ironic because that's kind of exactly what she did with a biologist and everybody else, right? They were just tools. They had no connection outside of that. They were only a means for her to get what she wanted, which is closure. It's an emotional thing. It has nothing to do about Area X or what happened or why it happened. But all Lowry wanted, off the record, told to him and him alone, was that an account of your last days on the Forgotten Coast. So this is the secret. Not only her secret identity, but her past and why she is important. Tossed onto the table, the latest satellite footage from above Area X, images from on high reduced to 8.5 by 11 glossies. Evil advances with good. But these terms have no meaning in Area X or to Area X. So why should they always apply to us in pursuit of an enemy to whom they go unrecognized? An indifferent context deserves equal indifference from us if we want to survive. I want you to meet someone else who has a stake in this. Someone you know already. Jackie Severance. Jackie is going to be my advisor on this situation. And she asks, did you bring anything back with you? Just the usual recovery along the way of past expedition equipment. As happens with many expeditions. The story you and Whitby have decided on because you want to hold on to the plant and the phone. Oh, where does it come from? What's the significance of the phone? I don't remember. I don't think we know yet. What sense did you get out of the journals in the lighthouse? No particular sense or impression or idea, you tell her. They were just journals because you don't want to go there, don't yet want to relive the end of your trip, the things that happened in the lighthouse. We know what happened in the lighthouse with Whitby, don't we? A few useless pleasantries, and Jackie left the room as fast as she got there. But Lowry there at the center of his secret headquarters, overlooking the sea, as snow in thick flakes begins to cover the grass, the sea mines, the little paths, such a beautiful, very Bond visual. And what I want is this. The next expedition, they don't go to Central. They come here. They receive their training here. You want Area X to react? You want something to change? I'll change it. I'll coil things so far up inside Area X's brain, things that'll have a sting in the tail. That'll draw blood. That'll fucking make the enemy know we're the resistance, that we're onto them. So it's a very different view that Lowry has, right? He thinks it's the enemy, whereas a lot of people do, looking at it from the outside. But for Grace and many people like the biologist, Ghostbird, even Control, of course, it's kind of this emotional, transcendent experience. It's for them to find out who they are and their place in the world, even though it's really not the world, right? And now we're back. We are back to find out what happened with the director and Whitby. So at the lighthouse, Whitby had wandered, and you were still drifting through the downstairs when you realized that you couldn't hear him moving around in the next room anymore. But soon enough, you realized he'd gone up to the lighthouse stairs. There came the sounds of fighting and the splintering of wood, one voice rising above the other, both curious and similar. And how could there be a second voice at all? A second voice at all? Well, we know. So you followed fast, and as you climbed, there was both a doubling and a dissonance. For in memory, the steps had been much wider, the trek much longer, the space inside the lighthouse conveying a kind of weightlessness. And at the top, you discovered Whitby down in the watchroom, panting like an animal, his clothes torn and blood on his hands, and the strange impression that the edges of the journals were rippling, enveloping Whitby. Strange, right? Trying to drown him. No one else there, just Whitby with an impossible story of encountering his doppelganger, false Whitby, on the landing until they had fallen through the open trapdoor onto the mound of journals, off balance and awkward. Holy crap, we have a double Whitby. It seems like the journals were trying to eat him as well, perhaps. How quickly did this happen? Why did it happen? Did they just sprout out of these journals? I have no idea, but it's crazy. Now we understand that we don't quite know who the real Whitby is. Was it the copy inside the Southern Reach, or was it the real one? I don't know that we'll ever know. All of those journals without names, but only functions noted, and sometimes not even that, as if Area X had snuck in its own accounts. Are they shifting and settling, as if something huge sleeps beneath them, breathing in and out, like this is the heart, right? This is the heart of the entire place. Until there was a crack of a neck, of a spine, and the Whitby pinned against the mound goes slack and his head lolls to the side, and the Whitby atop him frozen, emits a kind of defeated sob and slides off. Dead Whitby, I like how these are all capitalized proper nouns, awkwardly manages to wriggle and roll his way free and sits there in the corner staring at his own corpse. I'm gonna guess that it's a real Whitby. I don't know. I just think because he kind of went a little crazy, whereas it seems like the copies, we only really know one copy, and that's being Ghostbird, right? Where she seems to be more together, let's say, than the real biologist. But let me know what you think in the comments. Is it real Whitby or false Whitby? On the way down, you search for dead Whitby, but he still wasn't anywhere. You may never know the truth. But in what Whitby swore was dead Whitby's backpack, you found two curious items: a strange plant and a damaged cell phone. Okay, we didn't get enough information to understand if that is going to clue us in on to who is who. Anyway, I know I'm repeating myself. Let me know down in the comments what you think. And there I go, repeating myself again. Maybe it's all the talk of copies that's making me do it. But let's move on to chapter 10, Control. Control woke to a boot and a foot just 6 inches from where he lay on his side under some blankets. A dragonfly wing had been broken along the axis of that tread, pulverized into rounded panes and an emerald glitter. I love this image because we are tight, right in there, looking up at this boot heel, like, inches away from our face. And Jeff Vandermeer, he goes into some really amazing detail that just completely sets the stage, and it shows with microscopic detail almost what Control is going through. Next to the boot, the pale brown sole of a muscular foot, and we know who it is. It's Grace Stevenson. She looked as if she had endured a lot in a short time. I just noticed that because I finished this chapter a little while ago. A short time. She looked as if she had endured a lot in a short time. Well, we know it has been longer than that. Why the hell did you go through my pockets? Control says. But she ignored him, leafing through Whitby's last words. Kind of the Bible of Control, right? Are you real? She asked in a kind of rasp. Grace, don't use my fucking name. Don't ever use my name. No names. It may still no names. What script are you running off of? Central or the L word? The L word. Because she's not going to name him as well. But then Control feels what Ghostbird called the brightness. It's rising now. It's a tightness in his chest. So what does that mean? Well, it could mean transformation, right? We don't know yet. We'll find out, though. She ignored that and said, when did you get here? 5 days ago. How long since the border shifted? Had Grace lost track of the days out here by herself? Clearly, kind of, no more than 2 weeks. Omitting 2 that Ghostbird had created it. This is when they're talking about the portal, the door under the sea. I don't think I got that from Authority. I didn't realize she created it. I thought maybe she just found a spot. But anyway, all of these people are getting acquainted with each other. Do you mind if I wake up Ghostbird now? I gave her a sedative with her water last night. You what? Echoes of a dozen domestic terrorism interrogations, all the symbols and signs. So he's having trauma, right? He's very triggered by this because of what he went through. And such a great scene in Authority when he had the bullhorn and the megaphone and the alcohol and swearing and repeating these things. So he's feeling it. To have come so far, but that old dynamic, sharing a smoke in the courtyard of the Southern Reach, had turned to ash. So he's reminiscing. He's thinking about that moment that he and Grace had, having that cigarette at the back of the Southern Reach, and it seems to be all for naught. But for her, we know it's a long time, right? It takes getting used to knowing that everything we did meant nothing, that Central abandoned us, that our new director abandoned us. I tried to stay. You told me to go. So she's talking to him, but also that nothing means nothing because it's all about the psychologist, right? Crazy Lowry, of course. And then the psychologist or the director, the ex-director, I guess in this case, Gloria, Cynthia, whatever you want to call her. She has a very personal stake in this. So it's basically like 2 loose cannons running this whole thing. That's why nothing makes sense. That's why everything's in shambles. That's why there doesn't appear to be a reason. What happened to the people in the science division? They decided to barricade the basement, but that place was changing very fast. I didn't stay long. Ooh. Such a chilling thing to think about, right? What happened to those guys? Because when he got down there, he touched the wall or the door and it just like turned into that strange manta ray-like flesh. What about the director? I put a bullet in her head, as per prior orders. Once I determined that what had returned was an intruder, a copy, a fake. So she knows, she just shoots her right in the head. No problem. I went where she said. I did exactly what she said and we accomplished nothing. We made no difference. So she was wrong, just wrong. And she had no plan at all. Right, she didn't have a plan. Well, she has like a sort of a desire, but not really a plan. So everybody's kind of finally figuring everything out. From the windows of the landing of the ruined lighthouse, The world looked different, and not just because Grace had re-entered it. The ghost-like remains of houses, walls like warped slabs of flesh sagging into other, even more rotted flesh. There was no door on the border leading home. Grace had terminated the director's doppelganger. Grace had felt the border move through and past her. It was like being seen, being naked, being reduced down to nothing. That's such a crazy way to explain it and what that might feel like. So to me, this is kind of the cosmic horror aspect of things, because if you're familiar with Mr. H.P. Lovecraft, you'll know that key idea of cosmic horror is our insignificance, right? So it's everything's bigger than us. The horrors are bigger than us. We are just a tiny speck of nothing. And that's exactly what she's saying right here. The feeling she got while she was crossing into Area X. The Southern Reach was done, and even if they hunkered down in the Science Division for the next century, became the subterranean seeds for pale cave-dwelling people who lived in fear, which is funny. That reminds me of the movie The Descent, which I hadn't seen since it came out, but I watched it again, and that's the image that popped into my head. You had expedition training. The basic protection package, we called it. The director came up with it. If you plan for this, that means there's a mission. Does it look like there's a mission? Indeed, there does not. And then finally, Ghostbird wakes up. Have you seen the biologist? So she's just fixated, trying to find the biologist, which I guess makes sense since she's a copy of her. And then finally, Grace, she's not answering anybody, and she says, do you know how long I've been on this island? Did you ever ask me that? How long have you been on the island? Control asks. 3 years. I've been here 3 years. Boom. Wow. I forgot about that too. I don't know why I forgot so much about this book, but I'm loving that I did, because these kind of surprises are hitting me like I'm a new reader. So now we're dealing with time warps of some kind. So what does that mean? So how did Grace get here? She didn't find a gate, I guess. She kind of touched something or maybe passed through at the Southern Reach, whereas Control found another portal created by Ghostbird, it appears. Anyway, maybe we'll find out. I don't believe you, Ghostbird said. Grace pulled a sheaf of pages out of her knapsack, brittle, yellowing. They had handwriting on them, a rusting clasp in the corner. She throws these papers at Ghostbird. Read it. Read it before I waste time telling you anything else. Just read it. What is it? Control asked. The biologist's last will and testament, Grace said. Holy crap! You know what that means? It's annihilation! She handed her annihilation. That's basically how it is, because as we know, annihilation is entirely from Ghostbird's perspective. So cool little twist, Vandermeer. Clever, clever boy. You're implanting your own novel into the story. Cool stuff all around. Okay, I was wrong. I was wrong. And the other day when I shot the other part of this video, I mentioned, well, actually a few seconds ago for you, that Annihilation was the book we were talking about, or the one that Grace found. And in fact, that was incorrect, because part 2, Fixed Light, is in fact even newer entries from the biologist, which, man, I just was lost in this section. I read it all in one go. I couldn't stop. It had these just beautifully short, just compact chapters, scenes, whatever you want to call them. And it just had this haunting, meditative, beautiful, sad journey, the final journey of the biologist. Now, I don't know if we're going to hear from her again anymore in the rest of this book, because I skimmed a little bit and I saw that there were no more POVs. I guess this isn't really a POV. It kind of is. A section dedicated to her. So I can only imagine that the only closure we're going to get beyond this is going to be through the eyes of the other characters. But let us begin with part 2, Fixed Light. Writing for me is like trying to restart an engine that has rested for years, silent and rusting, in an empty lot choked with water and dirt, infiltrated by ants and spiders and cockroaches, vines and weeds shoved into it and sprouting out of it. A kind of coughing splutter, an eruption of leaves and dust, a voice that sounds a little like mine, but is not the same as it was before. I use my actual voice rarely enough. Man, hell of an intro. Man, it's saying so much. It's, you know, we're going back to the empty lot, of course. She's reminiscing about that magical spot she had, but she's also talking about that writing for me is like trying to restart an engine that has rested for years. So she is not accustomed to this. She is not, this is not her forte, let's say. Well, I don't know that any form of communication really is her forte. However, she writes very beautifully. So regardless of what she thinks of herself, she can convey herself and communicate in a very effective manner. At least I think so. Perhaps, too, hesitance overtakes me because when I think of writing, I glimpse the world I left behind. Of course, memory, right? It's sad, it's painful. It seems a myth, a kind of mythic tragedy, a lie, that I once lived there or that anyone lives there still. So, yeah, that's true because I'm trying to think if I've ever been somewhere long enough. I don't think I have. I've never done anything crazy in my life, really, but I can't imagine anyway that being so in an alien place for so long and it's just absolutely, you're absolutely disconnected from it. It can almost feel like it never existed. It could feel like a dream. And it's cool because it feels like she's living in a dream, right? Area X is this crazy alien place, but she's thinking of her home as this mythic place, right? The real world. But still having decided to finally let the brightness take me. After holding out against it for so many years, I'm giving it one more try. So many years. So just like Grace, she's been here for a long time. And I'm curious to see how Vandermeer goes into that, if he does at all, in terms of the weird time jumps or time warps or whatever you want to call them, the distortions of time. Because we all know that this has happened in a very short period of time relative to real world time, but it seems to be that time is affected very differently in Area X. But if someone does read it, know that I didn't live here waiting for rescue, hoping for a 13th expedition. So, I don't know. Again, resigned to her fate. I think it's such a, again, love these sequence of chapters, but I'll continue. But the world beyond, or even the dangers of this one I live in, will be even less of a concern in a few days. Ooh, ticking clock. What did Jeff Vandermeer do right there? He set it up for us. So let's begin with, well, let's continue, I should say, with 01, the brightness. At first, there was always the island ahead of me, somewhere along the coast, and my husband's presence in the breadcrumb notes I thought I found along the way, that I hoped came from him. According to his journal, it took my husband 6 days to reach the island the first time. It took me somewhat longer. Behind me at the lighthouse, a luminescence was growing in strength, something enormous rising from the sea in a continuous slow-motion wave. The air seemed malleable, like it could be convinced or coerced. So I love how she's personifying this place because it is in a way, right? It's an alien effect, I guess. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows, and I love that we don't know, because the mystery of the unknown is far more interesting. But it's a strange place. She's chasing her husband, and there has to be some worth in that, some value in that to her person, to her psyche, to her perception. Bruce, some of you out there, right, who aren't a big fan of the biologist, nor do I know how much of these phenomena, these thoughts, I should attribute to the brightness within me, right? Who knows? What's real? What's not? Just when I thought the brightness was one thing, it would become another. The fifth morning, I rose from the grass and dirt and sand. The brightness had gathered to form a hushed second skin over me, that skin cracking from my opening eyes like the slightest, the briefest touch of an impossibly thin layer of ice. I could hear the fracturing of its melting, as if it came from miles and years away. Such a cool way to describe that. I mean, she's very articulate, right? Very poetic. So even though she doesn't feel like she can write very well, granted, this is a Vandermeer writing it, but still, I don't find it obtrusive, because often when I read books and you hear very poetic writing that is not in the omniscient voice, you kind of like internally groan a little bit, because you're like, would this character really speak that way? But the biologist, she's a strange individual, and also this environment, who knows? Maybe that's having an effect on her as well. I think that humans in general can be very poetic creatures when they really are in the right headspace or have experienced certain things, and she clearly has. So it manifested in my chest like a hot red stone that pulsed next to my heart. Interesting that it's separate, right? It's not that it's part of her. I mean, it is, but she's describing it like this thing that's right next to her heart, another parasite, you might say. Was the brightness more separate than I knew? And why did the psychologist's words appear in my mind so often, and why could I not pry them out? Ooh, interesting observation. That night I made camp, started a fire because I didn't care who saw me. So again, she's resigned. Whatever is going to happen, it's going to happen. Soon, too, a moaning came out of and through the dusk, along with a familiar thrashing, as something ponderous fought against the reeds. It's just an old friend, she says to the moaning and the thrashing. We know who it is. We know what it is. I went out to meet it, my brightness muttering the whole way in a surly, almost petulant fashion. A monster? Yes, but after the monster that was the crawler, I embraced this simpler source of mystery. And this is such a great segue, right? He leaves us hanging and he gives it to us right away. Chapter 2, O2, I should say, the moaning creature. I'll spare you the search for this creature I had once fled. Eventually I came into a kind of clearing, an island of dirt covered in anemic grass and bounded by yet more reeds. At the far end, something pale and grub-like and monstrous flailed and moaned. The head was small compared to the body, but faced away from me, so all I could see was a thick, wrinkled neck morphing into the skull. So Jeff Vandermeer is very, very descriptive, and I feel like I would have preferred less description, even though it doesn't really make sense because she is in full control of this observation, right? It's lying there, it's moaning, sleeping, as she calls it. But I guess I'm more of a fan of the unknown, right? The little known. The moaning was deafening, the strange guttural tolling of a living cathedral bell. So I highlighted that because, man, I can't count. There's been at least 5 mentions of cathedral, and I don't think it was a mistake. I don't think it's a word it's rooted itself in Vandermeer's mind, and he just subconsciously creates it. I'm sure there's a lot of purpose to it. The body had the consistency and form of a giant hog and a slug, commingled. He likes that word. I shone the flashlight on the creature's head. It had a face of the psychologist from my husband's expedition. The mouth was open in a perpetual O as it moaned out its distress, as it made its wounded, halting progress in what amounted to circles. That's so sad. There's this poor guy who's been transformed, and he's just kind of like circling. He's kicking himself around because he's in this bloated body with these shitty arms and legs, basically, and he can't quite make sense of what's going on. He can't propel himself forward because he probably either can't or doesn't know what he should be doing. She doesn't know if he's in pain. I love this too because that's sort of what my initial thought would be, right? This thing is, let me put this out of its misery, but she's unsure. It's sleeping. Is it in pain? Is it just trying to say something? Who the hell knows? Its eyes had a white film over them that told me it was blind. Oh, even sadder. I should have felt something. Here we go. I should have been moved or disgusted by this encounter. Yet after my descent into the tower, my annihilation, there's that word again, by the crawler, I felt nothing. So here she's putting her carelessness on the crawler, versus saying it's her own thing, right? So we do know that she had a revelation at the very end of Annihilation. She was taking ownership of her actions. However, she did not change her actions. But now she is attributing her actions to the annihilation by the crawler. So she's kind of passing the buck a little bit, kind of putting the blame on something else. But also, it could be true, right? It could be true that she has definitely been changed or affected in some way. But it looked like a mistake, a misfire by Ariak. So this doesn't seem like all of the pristine beauty she's seen so far, which made me wonder if my brightness was a harbinger of some form of this. So now she's worrying she might change into something like this. Had I tricked myself into believing that letting the brightness overtake me would be a painless, even beautiful process? So now she's like, oh crap, I thought this was going to be beautiful. I thought I was going to turn into an amazing dolphin with a human eye or something. I would not end its misery in part because I worked from an incomplete data. Beneath what seemed to be a pain might lie ecstasy. See, this is weird. I don't know if she's trying to justify this to herself because she's fearful of killing this thing, or if she's genuinely feeling that way. There also came to me the thought that perhaps what this expedition member had brought to Area X had contributed to this final state. So that's a cool thing to think, is that, or to ponder, I guess same word or same meaning. But, you know, how you are, what you bring to this place is sort of what happens to you. And I like that. I like that sentiment. It's almost like, I don't want to say like an afterlife, like heaven or hell, because it is kind of passing judgment, but it's not in the traditional sense. It's something that it's almost like maybe your personal infection. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong word, but whatever's going on inside you beneath the surface is manifesting in a physical manner. And that's exactly what this guy had. But again, she's just hypothesizing. But this encounter did affect me in one way. I became resolved not to give in to the brightness, to give up my identity. Not yet. So she's not done yet, which brings us to O3, the island. Soon enough, the island became a shadow or smudge on the seaward horizon, so I knew it was only a matter of days. The island was as blank to me now as my husband had been upon his return. I like that parallel. I love it because we distinctly remember her just, this is not my husband. Something is wrong, even though I don't want to believe it. I know in my heart of hearts something is wrong, and now she's getting the effect from the island, which we know appears to be leading to a source of something. And I love that all these characters are converging to this point in different timelines, right? It's so cool to see the overlap and then witness, you know, we have Grace already, who's been there for 3 years, Control and Ghostbird get to her. They find the notes, and we know, like, in this very spot, the biologist was at one point years ago. Who knows? The paper was yellow and brittle when Grace found it. But I'm really excited. This is such a great way to build excitement in a reader, at least for me, is to know that, like, once we get to the end of this sequence of chapters, this part, that there's so many things we want to find out. Like, oh crap, you know, the biologist was here. Let's see if we can find any other clues. I secured my backpack and dove into the water, and I really love this first line. Anyone reading who likes stories about characters huddled around guttering fires with the wolves waiting just beyond will be disappointed to learn that I was not attacked by leviathans from the depths as I swam over to the island. So that's such a clever way to make time go forward without the reader saying, what, there's all this alien crap and she just swam over there? Come on, man. But, you know, she's poking fun at that trope, basically. The lighthouse kept striking me as a mirror of the lighthouse on the coast. Of course it is. I took my time later exploring the lighthouse, the buildings nearby, the abandoned town. So such a post-apocalyptic, Chernobyl-like zone, you might want to call it. It's definitely a zone. There were also signs of pollution, old scars. So here Vandermeer is continually injecting his environmentalism into the story, which I still feel like it's not bothering me. Let's say it's not bothering me. Even though it's popping out to me far more than it did on previous reads. This island is about 14 miles long, 6 broad, and 40 in circumference. So she's been walking here for a while. She's mapped the entire thing. But I also found one faucet in the lighthouse, so she gets some water. There's some brackish brown water, but it is definitely drinkable. And farther afield, I found a rich ecosystem in which a wary rabbit population was held in check by raptors and island foxes. So we're back to the rabbits. Could these be the rabbits that crossed over, or the ancestors, I should say? I don't know. Possibly. When I was done with this initial inspection, I could not say there was anything preternatural or unusual about the island itself, other perhaps than the owl. Boom! And then he takes us right to the owl, 04. See, I'm loving the music of this segue, so it's a hook at the very end, and boom, it carries you right through to the next one. Short chapters. I'm geeking out as a writer, so forgive me, but I love it. Did I find my husband? In a way, if not in the form in which I had known him. The unlikely silhouette of a common horned owl with sharp, tufted ears, rust-brown face with white feathers at chin and throat, mottled gray and brown body. So this is such a cool image, and I should probably go back and talk about it because she was looking at, here we go, it's the line before. A single stunted pine, the height of a person, stood defiant amid rocks and cormorants alike, blackened and almost bare of needles. On one outstretched branch, of course, is the owl. I vividly pictured that in my mind. It's such an atmospheric, ominous image, and again, another reason why I'm in love with these books. I found on the far western edge of the beach a small circle of rocks around the blackened ash of an old fire. So there's history, there's story in the environment itself. An old tent. Someone had lived here for a time. I woke only once during the night and saw the owl perched opposite me across the fire atop my backpack. It had brought me another rabbit. So she went hunting, got a rabbit, and now the owl is helping her hunt. So that's a little bit of a sentience, you might say, a little bit of awareness. I stayed there 3 days, and I admit I did so because of the owl and because the cove was near perfect. So this is her final resting place, her final home. It was clearly a standard issue tent. A little ways into the forest behind the tent, I found an expedition issue sidearm. I found the undershirt from an expedition uniform. So it's this trail, right? She finds the tent, she finds the uniform, she finds the gun. It's as if this person, her husband presumably, is stripping himself of his identity as humanity just along the way and you know, just succumbing to whatever's happening to him. And yet there was the owl always watching over me, always nearby. It's such a... I feel like this entire part, it could be a beautiful little short story. The thought crept into my head when I wasn't careful, and then I would banish it. Was this my husband in altered form? I'm guessing so, but yet there grew to be a useful symbiosis in our relationship. I continued to hunt for him, and he continued to hunt for me. So they are reconnecting, you might say. But the great thing is that we never know. We never know if this is her husband or not, and that's what makes this story so much more beautiful and effective in my mind, is that we're never truly given answers. It could be anybody. It could be just some other lost soul from Area X, another expedition, who, realized, is this owl, and realized, hey, here's another person. Finally, I've never seen a person for years. And it's comforting to me. '05, the Seeker and Surveillance Bandits. I love this because that is what she assumed the S and SB Brigade was. Definitely not that. But returned from my exploration with the owl as my companion, I now slowly took the measure of my immediate surroundings, the lighthouse, the buildings around it, and the town beyond. Here and there I found more signs of expeditions that had reached the island and either gone back across the water or died here and been transformed here. So she finds sedimentary layers of information believed dated back to just before and right after the creation of Area X interested me more. Perhaps had taken up residence here within the narrow spectrum, and those people went by the initials of S and SB, although I never once found a fragment that told me what these initials stood for. In lieu of any other evidence, I called them the Seeker and Surveillance Bandits. I love this. The leavings of the S and SB, their detritus, took the form of damaged equipment that I identified as meant to record radio waves to modern infrared and other frequencies, along with more esoteric machines that defeated my attempts to decode their purpose. So we all know this already, that they have these crazy paranormal-like devices. I took what I found at the lighthouse and begun to sorting through it. The SNSB had begun their occupation of this island, not with a mapping of the perimeter, but with a thorough investigation of the ruined lighthouse. So even they know there's something up with it. There were references to something that might or might not, in quotes, have been transferred, suggesting that perhaps the lens in the lighthouse I knew so well had originally come from here. There also was a debate as to whether they sought, in quote, an object or a recordable phenomenon, which seemed to return to the idea of linking the two lighthouses. So there's these parallels that we know, but she's putting it together. Some SNSB members seem to lack even a rudimentary understanding of science, and wasted my time with scrawlings about ghosts and hauntings and copied down passages from books about demonic possession. I can't wait to get into that because we've touched on that briefly with Saul, which I'm very excited to get back to his story as well. But we haven't gone this far, so it's cool to see her find evidence of this kind of activity or these kinds of beliefs, even though we haven't been necessarily informed of any of that yet to any kind of degree. This mind or the minds asked questions and did not seem interested in hasty answers, did not care if one question, 6 more, and if, in the end, none of these 6 questions led to anything concrete. There was a patience that seemed imposed and not at all a part of the swirling quicksilver consciousness that surrounded it. So this isn't really a scientific mind. This is sort of a just observing for the sake of observing mind. And there doesn't seem to be any rush to this. There's just kind of a, I guess, like an experience, right? It's almost like a whatever is will be, you know? Is that a Kamala Harris quote? And among this detritus, those feeble guesses, the word found, exclamation point, handwritten, triumphant, found what? And we never know. So I'm hoping that's a little hook for what they will find later in this book, or perhaps it's going to be in the prequel, Absolution, which brings us to chapter 06, The Passage of Time and Pain. I never had a country, never had a choice. I was born into one. But over time, this island has become my country, and I need no other. So that's such a cool quote because we have no choice where we're born, right? We're born, and this is what it is. Well, did she choose this? Yeah, I guess she kind of did in a way because she decided to go on an expedition and come to Area X. And now she's, even though it's a frightening place that transforms people into monsters or animals, she is choosing this as her own country. I never thought to seek the way out back into the world. As the years passed and no one else reached my island of refuge, I began to wonder if the Southern Reach existed anymore. So again, she's back to, was that all a dream? Did that ever exist? Or is this reality? It's her reality now. In the lengthening silence and solitude, Area X sometimes would reveal itself in unexpected ways. I began to perceive infinitesimal shifts in the sky as if the pieces did not quite fit together. Phantoms that almost made me reconsider my antipathy for the S and SB's emphasis on the supernatural. Once the sky broke open with a rain in an unnatural way, and through the murk an odd light burned in the limits of my vision. I glimpsed for a moment dissipating shadows that could have been particular storm clouds or the reverse quickening of some type of vast organism. So fucking cool, that's all I'm gonna say. Also had been accompanied by a changing of the night sky. There is never a moon, and the stars above are unfamiliar. They are foreign, belonging to a cosmology I cannot identify. Hyper Lovecraft, definitely. On at least 2 occasions, I would define this change as more significant as a kind of celestial cataclysm. What is the nature of my delusion? Am I hallucinating when I see the night sky that I know? I stand by the ruined lighthouse some nights and I look out to sea and realize that in this form, this body, I will never know. My survival has also, to put it bluntly, been predicated by hurting myself. So she's self-harm all of a sudden. I was using pain to push the brightness back, so she's still not ready to go, I guess, and pain is the way she's coping with it or delaying it. In a separate document, I have listed the best, least intrusive approaches. So what a kind soul, I guess, or a twisted soul, morbid soul, as she says here, but maybe she's doing it in case somebody else finds it and she found out what works for her. The owl that has been my companion these 30 years, died a week ago without my being able to help, without knowing until too late. He had become an old owl, and although his eyes were still enormous and bright, his colors had faded, his camouflage tattered. He slept more and did not go out to hunt as often. I fed him mice by hand in his redoubt at the top of the ruined lighthouse. I found him in the forest after he had been missing for a few days, and I had finally gone out to search for him. So it looks like he went out there, got attacked by some foxes or something, but my microscope had long since been abandoned in the corner of the lighthouse grounds. I had no heart to take samples to discover what I already knew, that in the end, there was nothing a microscope could tell me about the owl that I had not learned from my many years of close interactions and observation. What am I to say? That I do not miss him? Man, such a powerful story, and it's so, again, it's very reminiscent of Annihilation because it's concise. It has such emotion. It has such heart. It says so much with so few words. And this is such a great reminder for me of like my first experience with it, or my experience with the first novel. It's a tragic tale, and I feel like with maybe a little bit of prologue-y kind of material, this could be its own short story in itself, or novella. But wow again. Let's talk about what we're going to read next time, everybody. Okay, why don't we read not all of part 3 because it's pretty long, but let's go all the way down through chapter 17. So chapter 001111. All the way through 0017, the director, which will bring us to, at least on my Kindle copy, page 254, which is about 70 pages. So let me know, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? Are you still loving this? Oh, such a great, oh man, I love that section. That again, brings me back. It's the part of Area X, or the Southern Reach trilogy, that I love. It's these quiet stories. It's these very human stories. It's not so much the overarching conspiracy, like, you know, reading about Lowry was fun and everything, but it's not the vibe that I like. He almost took it a little bit too far into Bizarro World for me anyway, and maybe it was just my reading and my impression, and you guys love it out there, but yeah, it's these kinds of things. It's like sitting out on this island, this abandoned island, for 30 years. She lived there, holy shit, with this owl that she thinks is her husband, and they just lived in this symbiotic relationship, and they hunted for each other. But man, such a tragic story. But also, if it is her husband, I'm assuming it is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, and that's the beauty of it. But they had some closure together in a way, even though she never truly knew. Even though she says, what did she say? What did she say? I had no heart to take samples to discover what I already knew. That in the end, there was nothing but a microscope to tell me about the owl that I had not learned from my many, many years of close interactions and observation. I believe that's an answer, ladies and gentlemen. If it's not a true answer, it's the only answer she needs. So again, I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for continuing the discussion. I know it's a long series. I hope you're enjoying it. And of course, reading along with me and hanging out with me. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.